So we are going to be in the 12th chapter of John. We closed off with verse 33, looking into verse 34. We're going to be looking at where's my runner? I need somebody to be a runner. A scooter? A Segway? No. I want one of the rolling scooters. By the way, having an arthritic hip does not like hurricanes. Yes, preschool is closed today and tomorrow. So I don't want Acts 28. That's actually kind of scary. So okay. In case you're wondering where we are, in case you're wondering what terms we're going to be looking at, and there you go. So I'm going to just read verse 34 right now. The crowd spoke up. We have heard from the law that Christ will remain forever, that the Christ will remain forever, or the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? So you get some terms to really dig into. And first of all, the Christ, as I said, it could also be Messiah. Messiah is simply the Hebrew, Moshiach. Christ is Christos, the Greek, later Latin. So these two terms are synonymous. It's just one is Hebrew, one is Greek. And just be thankful you're in here, not out there. So we have heard the Christ. So the Jews would be schooled in Christological faith. You know, they for a long time have looked at what that chosen one, the anointed one, the one who came to do God's will would do. And looking at that, they have a long lore, a long history of what they expect from the Christ. Now, initially, this Christ ties itself to Genesis 3:15, and then also the covenant to Abraham, you know, all the blessing. Through time, that changes, it transforms a little bit, and it takes on a different aspect. It moves away from, I'm going to put a term up here. And I'm using deliverer, not redeemer, for a reason. Redeemer could also be used there, but I'm using deliverer for a reason. In Genesis 3:15, from whom does the deliverer deliver God's people? Satan. Okay? I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, you shall strike his heel. The deliverance is from Satan. Abraham, the deliverance is from anyone who curses him. I will curse anyone who curses you. I will bless anyone who blesses you. So it's not as clear on that deliverance but the deliverer still is the one who God himself will stand for Abraham and his people. And then, of course, down through time, that becomes Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob. And so you get the Jewish people out of that. And so there's that deliverance in the make you a great nation, and bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. And I'm shortening that covenant down to just a few points because it's going to come into that Son of Man. So in the midst of that covenant, what happens? You know, they are the chosen people, right? Yes. Okay, they are the chosen people who not once, not twice, but 3 times are put into bondage. Correct? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, which actually we could make that one 2 or 3 captivities, because you can have Babylon, then you can have Media, then you can have Persia, because Babylon is later, while they're captives of Babylon, Babylon is conquered by Media, who is conquered by Persia, and so you could make that one, 3 captivities, but we generally think of it as 1. So in the midst of that, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. They go into captivity. Where's that deliverer? Well, Daniel, Isaiah, Jeremiah all talk about how God is going to deliver them. Daniel even uses the term of the 70 years. After 70 years, I'll bring them back. And so there is that deliverance promise. And in Daniel 7, I meant to mark this, and I didn't. In Daniel 7, which, by the way, becomes a section that ties into this reference, Daniel has a dream of 4 beasts. In the first year of Belshazzar, that was Nebuchadnezzar's son, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying on his bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground, so that it stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads. It was given authority to rule. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I looked, thrones were set up in place. The Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and all books were opened. And then we move down a little bit. I'm going to skip the next section, kind of the beginning of the judgment. Verse 13, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations, all peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. There's your quote that takes that Messiah, our Christ, and transfers it to Son of Man, and ties that Son of Man to that Christological prophecy and the Messianic prophecy, because Daniel sees one who delivers the people of God from the four nations. And by the way, we're not going to get into the discussion of four nations. Yes, sir. Yes. No, go ahead.
So Christ is comparing Christ, the Son of Man. They're asking, who is it?
No, okay. We'll get back to that one, okay? I'm not to the Son of Man yet. I just have tied it to the Christ, because they start off with, wait a minute, we know from the law, or we read in the law, that the Christ stands forever. This is the phrase that gives them that Messiah standing forever, and it's tied to the term Son of Man. All right, so I've got about one more point on that one, and then we'll go to the Son of Man and why they question that, and where this Son of Man becomes so prevalent in the Gospels. By the way, Son of Man is used 58 times in the 85 times in the Old Testament. But it always describes a person. And by the way, a lot of those times are in one book. Can anybody tell me what book? Nope. No. Ezekiel. Every time God talks to Ezekiel, he doesn't call him Ezekiel. He says, Son of Man. You know, and then Son of Man, and then he says something to Ezekiel. That's the book where Son of Man becomes the most prevalent, but it is referring to that prophet, and that's got a tie-in a bit too. But 85 times in the roughly 85 times in the Old Testament, but it's never the Son of Man. It's always a Son of Man, or simply the title Son of Man. The article is different. And as Dr. Herbert told me in my Greek classes way back 40 years ago, pay attention to the article. It makes a difference. You know, and so in the Gospels, it changes. And by the way, Jesus by the way, every time in the Gospel that the term Son of Man is used, it refers to Jesus and only Jesus. Jesus is usually the one speaking it. I think there's only 4 times in the whole New Testament that the term the Son of Man is used, and it's not Jesus speaking. And I think there's like 58 times or 54 times in the New Testament. The bulk of them, like 50 times, in the 4 Gospels. Matthew uses it the most. I think he's got 24 times. Mark has 14. Luke has 8 or 9, and then John has some too. So the Gospel writers pick up on it, but it's always Jesus using that term. Jesus talking about himself. Jesus tying himself back to that Daniel 7 picture with the one who is like a Son of Man approaching the Ancient of Days on his blazing throne, and he's handed all authority and power over every people, language, and nation. Okay. So now we understand that this is a term that Jesus applies to himself. Nobody else has applied it to him yet. But in the minds of the people, these 2 terms are tied together because of this deliverance. Daniel talks about one who comes, who can stand before the Ancient of Days and can deliver God's people and is given authority that never goes away. And there, by the way, if we want to get into some really weird writings, we can get into this, some of the Apocrypha and the Pseudepigrapha, which I really don't ever quote, although there is one. If we go to the book of Jude, Jude is in the New Testament, way, way back, almost to Revelation. What? And I want you to turn to the 3rd chapter of Jude. Anybody who knows the Bible knows that Jude is one of those one-chapter books. So turn to the book of Jude. Don't look for the 3rd chapter any more than you would look for Hezekiah. But in Jude, the 14th verse, Enoch, the 7th from Adam, so that is the Enoch that was taken to heaven, father of Methuselah, who died at 969. Methuselah died at 969 years old. Enoch actually lived longer than that because he's still alive at the time of Jesus. Enoch, the 7th from Adam, 7th generation from Adam, prophesied about these men. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone and to convict all the ungodly of all the ungodly acts that they have done in an ungodly way and of all the harsh words sinners have spoken against him. These men are grumblers and fault finders. They follow their own evil desires. They boast among themselves and flatter others for their own advantage. So, I mean, Enoch is quoted, but, you know, the Lord is coming with the thousands and thousands and will defeat those who speak against him. Again, there you get that Abraham covenant. But, yeah, so Enoch is one of those that it's like, whoa, wait a minute, it actually does exist because Jude quoted it. But like I said, we don't want to go into those. But when we look at Daniel and that one who was like, and by the way, I think in Daniel, that's the operative word that we need to look at. Like a son of man. Why would Daniel, all right, other than in Ezekiel, whenever son of man is used, it refers to simply a human being or mankind, right? A son of man. You know, you're a son of man, right? You're a son of man. You're a son of man. Okay, so you're a human being, right? Every time it's a son of man. Why would Daniel, if it's simply a man, why would Daniel use the phrase like a son of man? Because there's something different about him. By the way, how many of you sons of men are daughters of men? How many of you come with the clouds of heaven? Think about this. Clouds were following Jesus. He may have even been coming on the clouds. That's what Daniel is seeing. And so the clouds are even answering his will. This is a picture of somebody that is not just a human being. So now we have this picture from Daniel 7 of one like a son of man who comes and approaches the Ancient of Days, who, as he approaches, is given authority and power, and whose reign is forever. Again, going then to David, and one from your line will sit upon your throne. What's the word? One from your line will sit upon your throne forever. Okay, so now we understand where they are when they say, we read in, would help to mark my place before I turn away from it. We have heard from the law that the Christ will remain forever. So in other words, the Christ is eternal. So then now comes the question. All right, it's not it is not it's not up for discussion as to whether the Christ is temporary or eternal. Scripture tells us Christ is eternal. The one he's given, the Son of Man, is given eternal power and authority over every race and language and people. And so if this Son of Man, this Christ, remember now the two terms, Daniel has tied the two terms together, so when they say Christ, they're saying Son of Man. When they're saying Son of Man, they're saying Christ. When this Christ comes, do you need a Bible? All right, we're in John 12. So when they say one, the other is in the background, so it's not like it's a difference. All right, so we have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. So now the question, how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? They understood him when he said the Son of Man must be lifted up as the Son of Man must die. And be died in a specific fashion. So they understood what he was saying, but then if he's applying that Son of Man term and that Christ term to himself, he can't die. He can't die because he's eternal. So that's what they're saying. More than just who is the Son of Man is, how can you say that about the Son of Man if the Son of Man is Christ? Is there another Son of Man? And so, who is this Son of Man that you're talking about? You're obviously not talking about the Son of Man that I know. Because the Son of Man that I know from Daniel and from the Scriptures stands forever. So who you talk about, Willis? If anybody knows the reference on that one, you're old enough. Who is this Son of Man? And so I would say in the Bible, in the Gospels, Son of Man is probably Jesus' favorite title for himself. Why? Jesus' favorite title for himself is Son of Man. Why? He could have used this title, right? Rightly so. But can this title fulfill Genesis 3:15? Is God the seed of Eve? See, God makes the promise, but God can't fill the promise himself. There's a lineage to that promise. Must be of the flesh, must be a Son of Man, and that's why this whole incarnation comes about. It's why when Gabriel goes out to Mary first and then to Joseph, the message is, God is sending his son. Mary, what is formed in her womb is from God, and he will deliver God's people. In other words, he is the one that is the Genesis 3:15 man. He is he will be Son of God, yet Son of Man. We talked a couple weeks ago about how much that blows our minds that he can be fully God and fully man at the same time. It kind of, split him in half? What? Yes, Daniel.
In Genesis 3:15, Jesus exists before all things, but in what form?
God's plan was already in place, and it's my hypothesis that God didn't just think that up on the spur of the moment. And Jesus was there, and Jesus wasn't saying, "Are you sure about that, Dad? Wait a minute, are you sure you want to make that?" No, Jesus was there fully complicit, fully speaking that promise, and knowing that he was going to be that fulfillment, You know, and he knew exactly, which is why I don't think the Garden of Eden is all, or the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Gethsemane is about doubt, but it's about, are you sure is this going to have any impact? Jesus has seen how people have responded to his message. They see a miracle and they don't praise God, they want more miracle. You know, it's kind of like you have somebody come by the door and I need $20 for gas. You give them $20 for gas. The next day they're back. Hey, can you give me $25 for food? You know, so are you sure, Father? Is there any other way that this would work better? And it's not just, I don't want to die. Although on his human side, that may have been there.
Or fear. Could have been frightened.
Well, he was fully human. And humans have that built-in fight or flight mechanism. And so, yeah, you know, he knows exactly what we go through. And so there is that. But I don't think it's doubt of the plan so much as, are you sure this is the way it goes? You know, I know we've talked about it from the beginning of recorded time, but is this really the way, Father? But it's always thy will. Always thy will, because he knows. He knows this is the only, it's not, is this the best way? It's the only way. And in the end, many of the people will remain right where they are with the crucify him, crucify him. Many of them will remain, he is a fraud, a huckster, a scam artist. Many of them will try to discredit everything that God, and I almost said that he did, but God did in Jesus' crucifixion. And Jesus knew beforehand that there are those who would not believe. Is there another way that will bring them in, Father? But there's not. Genesis 3:15 has to be fulfilled. It has to be fulfilled with somebody who can die for the sins of the world, but also who is the second part of that equation, is of the seed of mankind. And by the way, plug for the Advent midweek series, Seed of Life. I've taken the plural off of it. There's only one seed of life. But looking at that heritage of Jesus from the seed of Adam and Eve, the seed of Abraham. Remember, God says that through Abraham's seed, all nations will be blessed. Looking at that covenant seed, and then I'm playing a little bit with David. It's not really seed in the promise, but the branch, the stem, the root. You know, so they all grow out of that seed, and so the seed of David, and that not just being a people, but being a royal people. And so that seed is going to come back in December when we talk at our midweeks on seed. But he has to be the seed of Eve, or the seed of man. So he has to be the son of man in order for Genesis 3:15 to kick in. So Jesus uses that term rather than Son of God because he wants them to feel that Genesis 3:15 effect. I'm not here to deliver you from the Romans. By the way, the Romans are who most people that ever want to discuss the four kingdoms of Daniel, Rome is the fourth kingdom in most people's interpretation. There are several other interesting ones. Sometimes just type into Google the four kingdoms of Daniel. And it's a wonderful wormhole you can spend hours on. But the most accepted interpretation is that Rome is that fourth kingdom. And so, no, I'm not here just to take that fourth kingdom on. I'm here to take on one that precedes all, and that is I'm taking on the great enemy, Satan, and I'm going to deliver you from him. And that's why he uses that term Son of Man so much. So who is this Son of Man? Son of Man, you don't go back to David, you don't go back to Abraham, you go all the way back to Genesis 3:15, and there you see that Son of Man. Everything that Daniel says comes out of that Genesis 3:15. If you cut it any short of that, he becomes simply a military conqueror. Because then he's simply here to knock off one of the four kingdoms. And by the way, by the time of Jesus and through that intertestamental time, the messianic lore has shifted away from Genesis 3:15 and into Daniel 7. They are looking for a conqueror, a hero to come and deliver God's people and God's nation, God's land, from the unholy terror that has it right now. And so they're looking for that one that stands before the Ancient of Days so that he can then say, Romans, you get out in 24 hours or you will be utterly destroyed. Which is by pretty much what that ancient prophecy of Daniel or that ancient vision of Daniel says, is that once that Son of Man comes in, the nations are going to just go and be gone. The stone is hurled at the statue and the statue crumbles. And that stone is Jesus. You have to go to Daniel 2 for that image, for the image of the statue made of four. That's Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You have to go there to see that. But see, that's the foreshadow of the four beasts that are the four kingdoms. And so you can get into Daniel 7, Daniel 2. Son of Man doesn't really come in Daniel 2. It comes in Daniel 7. But same imagery from Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And it's interesting that under Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, Daniel has the same thing happen. So when we look at that Son of Man, it's always tied to Christ, but it's always tied to Christ through Genesis 3:15. And the deliverance is that deliverance from Satan. They don't recognize that, and that's why they ask the question, who is this Son of Man? Because it doesn't fit their picture. You know, it's kind of like having one of the preschool kids draw me a picture and hand it to me. And first of all, you start out going, trying to figure what's up and what's down, and then trying to figure out what they've drawn so you can say, oh, what a wonderful... And half the time I'll say, oh, man, what a wonderful giraffe. It's a dog. And you really don't want to say it, so what is this? But see, the Jews, they don't have that yet. They just spout off with, oh, what is this? So who is this Son of Man? Jesus is going to draw another term in, and it's a term that doesn't necessarily tie itself to Genesis 3:15, but it does tie itself to that messianic prophecy. And it has to do with, and by the way, this is one of John's favorite words, light. The other one is love. He loves writing about those two words, but light. Does Jesus answer their question? No. Well, he does, but he doesn't. Yeah, you're right. I was talking to a guy at the conference, Rick Armstrong. He's with Lutheran Counseling Services, and you know I've known him for years, and he's retired now. His daughter's running the Lutheran Counseling Services, and we were talking, and I said, you know, my counseling shifted, you know, many years ago. Many years ago, if you came to me for counseling, first words out of my mouth would be, "Well, I think you need to." And I said, and I learned, and we were sharing this back and forth. I learned that that's Tim's answer. But Tim's answer may not very well fit whoever the person is. And there's a coaching person. He wrote a book on counseling and coaching. And instead of saying, "Well, I think you need to," it's, "What do you think you could do?" So it turns it around, and it probes inside of the other, and your questions become guiding to what's inside of that person. If Jesus answers, "I am Jesus, son of Mary, son of the Most High, heir of David's kingdom, heir of Abraham, the one who came to defeat Satan and fulfill Genesis 3:15, how do you think they would have reacted? No, they wouldn't have crucified. Get the biggest stone you can throw, and let's start hurling those stones, right? They wouldn't have accepted the answer that he would give. And in many cases where he doesn't directly answer the question, he gives them the clues, the keys to find that answer. And if they truly are looking to God's answer, God's will, they will have the answer. So, what's his answer? "A little while longer the light is with you." We were talking about Christ and Son of Man. What's this light you're talking about? Oh, yeah. What's the first word God speaks? Let there be light. First word he says is light. Several times throughout the Old Testament, that light comes in, and it becomes part of God's presence. Light and fire. Now, fire is heat, but fire is also light. In the Exodus, he becomes a column of smoke and a column of fire. Fire is visible at night, right? It's light. So if they were moving, they could follow. If they weren't moving, they could look to that column of fire and know that God is with us, right? They never had to fear that they were alone. See, that light becomes very important. And by the way, how would you like to be the most powerful army in the earth at that time? Riding in your chariots after this bunch of vagrants who have now run off from being slaves, and you're going to capture them and you're going to bring them back, and as you're approaching, all of a sudden, this wall of fire appears. How would you feel? That big? Would you, this has been something that's always been in my mind. Would you have wanted to follow after them after that fire appeared? I mean, they were either stupid. I know I'm not. I'm not allowed to say that word anymore. By the way, they were either stupid, or they were stupid. You know, I mean, it's kind of like, what part of fire appears out of nowhere and blocks your path do you not understand? And then, by the way, when the fire clears up, you see that the Red Sea has divided itself, and this whole gaggle of people is journeying through on dry ground. What part of that is not so miraculous and ought to scare the bejeebers out of you? No, honestly, if they'd backed out, Pharaoh would have had them killed, which, by the way, Pharaoh was with them, and he would have just had the ones that wanted to back out killed. So, yeah, they're dead either way, but, so they follow in, and, of course, then the waters crash down on them. But you see, the Israelites, time and again, are shown that light, but they don't see it. So now Jesus draws it upon himself. The light you have with you a little while longer. And it would have drawn up pictures of that light, that God that was with them. And by the way, after they built the tabernacle, where did the pillar of fire reside? Over the Holy of Holies. That was God's presence in their midst. And so that light was that presence of God. And so they would have been looking to that. A little while longer, the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtakes you. What do you think he means by that? Okay, good and evil. Anybody else? I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want other...
I heard that as, well, I guess we have darkness because the light was taken.
So, all right, the United States has always been called a city on a hill and a light on a hill. Do you believe that the United States today is light, or do you believe it's darkness? And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that. I see a lot of darkness. Well, of all the nations in the world, we probably have the most light, but it's getting very dim. When does it start dimming? When we kick God out. We not only turned our back on God, we said, go away. You're not allowed in our courthouses. You're not allowed in our schools. You're not allowed in our sporting events. You're not allowed in XYZ. And all of a sudden, God's not welcome. I was reading a short article, and it was asking the question, if God is not allowed in the public arena or the public marketplace, if God is not allowed in schools, and God is not allowed in sports, and God is not allowed to be proclaimed, you can't talk about Christianity or God, why in Minneapolis can the call to prayer be blasted so that every person in the city hears it 5 times a day? Is that not putting God into the public? A different God,
Yes.
but is it not the same thing? And I mean, that they were simply asking a question of how Islam gets a buy on it, but Christianity and Judaism do not. And it's kind of like, look for the article online. I can't remember exactly where I found it, but I was just reading it. Woke up at 5 o'clock this morning, couldn't go back to sleep, so I turned on my iPad and I was just cruising articles, looking at different things, and came across that one. And it's kind of like, that really is a pertinent question. But when we said to God, go away, God honored that request and went away. Now, the churches are praying that God would be still present and that God would be active, and I think that's why we do see the actions of God still occurring. But the general public have turned their light on that, and I see that as we still have the light, and so we're still working. But we're working among those who are in the darkness. And, that's that John 1:1 passage that that will be our Sunday Advent series. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not understand it. So we're going to be journeying through John 1:1 in our Sundays of December.
One of the things that within the Christian church, there's less and less pastors and people that are going to work, church workers.
There are fewer church workers. We talked about that at the district pastors conference that I was just at, and how short we are on pastors, and for every new pastor coming out of our seminaries, we have 4 to 5 vacancies, and it grows every year because we're losing 4 to 5 times the number we replace. It's unsustainable. What? Well, that's in that 400 to 500 we lose. Pastors retire. Pastors die. I know you think pastors live forever, but pastors die. Or pastors just get fed up with it and say, you know what? For my health, I'm done. I'm gone. I'm not. You can call me Tim. I'm no longer pastor. And I mean, and it's a very real situation in a lot of places because people just get tired. And so that darkness, pastors are one of those. Pray for your pastors. Always pray for pray for me, pray for all the pastors of our churches, because the darkness seeks to put us under. If Satan can cause one of us to fall, he causes hundreds to fall. And so he is working extra hard to cause the darkness to take over. And health problems, addictions, family problems, there's all kinds of problems going on in pastors' lives. And it consumes their time and it consumes them. And eventually they just say, you know what, I'd be better off leaving. The church would be better off without me. And that's sad. I know some very good teachers and pastors that have simply walked away because they couldn't take the strain anymore. And it's a shame. But so a little while longer the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The point I want to make on that, as long as you remain in the light, the darkness can't. How much darkness does it take to overcome the light? The answer is it can't. How much light does it take to dispel the darkness? Sit in a completely dark room, light one match, and the darkness is pushed back. The darkness can't intrude on the light when the light is there, but when you put that light out or let that light go out, then the darkness takes over. As long as you remain in the Word and the Word remains in you, and I want to stress that again, as long as you remain in the Word, but also that the Word remains in you, because by ourselves we would fail. But as long as that Word remains in us, that light remains in us, and the devil has no power. It's when we give into the darkness, when we let that light go out. And don't go quietly into that night. Rage against the dying of the light. Was that Dylan Thomas? Come on, one of my English teachers tell me this. What? Oh, it's the movie Interstellar. It was also in the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield, but I think it was Dylan Thomas that wrote that. What? Yeah, please do a search on that. But we need that sentiment in us. When we see the light being put out, we need to reignite it. We need to rage against the dying of that light. All right. Pastor for the win again. I've got people that think I know everything. I know everything, and that is that I don't know everything. Anyway, I was visiting with a family that oh, yes, ma'am. Just a second. So I was visiting with the family. The wife is very sick, and her daughter-in-law and some of the grandkids were there, and they were throwing questions at me, and I was answering the questions. And the next time I went by, they weren't there, but the husband was there, and he said, "My grandkids think you know it all." And it's kind of like, yeah, don't let them ask too many questions. Jerry. Yes? So I don't think it's two separate. I think the two are co-joined. So Jerry was asking about this, the stories go on in a physical and in a spiritual realm, if you will, and that there's light and darkness in both. And I don't see it as a divided. I see it as they're co-joined. It's just at times we recognize the physical more than the spiritual. But I don't think that I don't see it as two completely separate. Now, so Jerry is positing that in the spiritual world, the light prevails and the darkness fails. In the physical world, the darkness seems to win and the light fails. And I'm going to ask you one question. At the end of the day, who wins? The Christian or the atheist? No, no, no. Answer my question before you ask another one. Okay. No, you said no, and you were going a different direction. Answer my question. At the end of the day, who's better off at their death, a Christian or an atheist? Who wins? The Christian always. So it may seem like the darkness is winning.
There is a prevalence by the physical. I think that there seems to be in the spiritual universe that the darkness is thrown out. It is always illuminated. Whereas in the physical universe, the light is never put out.
I don't know that I'll agree. I don't know that I'll agree that in the spiritual realm, the darkness is always thrown out. I think there's a constant battle between the light and darkness in both. And it may seem like at times the light's winning or the darkness is. If the darkness was completely thrown out in the spiritual world, would Satan have any impact on the physical world? No.
Just because Satan has been cast out and
It, is Satan physical or spiritual? Now, is Satan physical or spiritual? God is spirit. We anthropomorphize God, but God is spirit. So is Satan. So are the angels. The angels are spirits, not physicals. We give them physical characteristics.
I see my guardian angel.
What?
See my guardian angel. If they're not,
They can't. Well, I mean, they're given to appear as, but they are not. You know, even like when Gabriel appears, it appears as if. I mean, if an angel appeared as they truly are, we wouldn't be like in the some of the movies you see, that they take on human characteristics. But Satan, we only live in the physical world, and Satan. So therefore, in the spiritual world, if we live forever, I'm going to close it with this statement. If in the spiritual world we exist and we exist with God, then light wins in the spiritual world and in the physical world. Because physically we win, even though we seem at times to lose. And we've got to stop it there, Jerry. We could go on for 3 or 4 hours, but I don't know that people would keep hanging on online. But there is, and I don't agree that in the spiritual world the light has completely defeated the darkness. If that were so, that dark spiritual creature of Satan would have no impact on anything in the physical world, but because it is spirit. But I think there is that ongoing battle, and I mean, Revelation describes that battle between the spiritual powers of the forces of God and the forces of Satan on Armageddon or Harmageddo. So I mean, there is that ongoing battle, and I think there is that ongoing battle, and it's been going on since the time of Cain and Abel, since the time of Adam and Eve, the good and evil. And at times it seems like good loses. At times it seems like good triumphs for a time, and it's for a season. And I think we see that wave. At times it seems like we're on the top of the hill with good prevailing, and at times we're in that valley with evil prevailing. And I think we're in one of those valleys right now where it seems like everything is going bad. I don't think in the end that they're going to win. Margaret. I'm not going to be able to answer that question because they can't hear what you just said in the quote, and so I'm not going to answer that right now. We can have a conversation, but they didn't hear because they can't hear what you say, and that's why I don't want the discussion with Jerry to continue on, because they can't hear anything that's being said. We're working on that. Craig thinks he might have something that can put on the back wall that will pick up to here, and they can filter my voice out, and I don't know. He's going to wave his magic wand and see, but he said, now, I'll loan you this microphone, but this is an expensive microphone. You'll have to buy one. If it works, you'll have to buy one yourself, so we'll figure that one out. But I'll He will strike your heel. You will strike his heel. And you will strike his heel. Striking Jesus? Yes. Yeah. In the crucifixion? Yes. That it's seen, he doesn't just come as this. So it's at Genesis 3, he will crush your head. The power of Satan is destroyed in that crucifixion, but he strikes the heel of Jesus in that mortal flesh. Because remember, once the incarnation happens, how long does that mortal flesh go on? Forever. Jesus at this moment is still fully God and fully man. He doesn't leave his humanity behind when he ascends. So he is fully God and fully man, but he goes there bearing the scars. He goes there bearing that wound that he bore for us. So that's the striking the heel. Yeah, let's talk about the other one. I do need to draw this to a close. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I do want to get to where we can have these discussions and people can hear what's going on. Because you guys have wonderful comments. I can't repeat everything you say. That's the problem. And so I've tried putting microphones out, and you won't take the microphones and speak into them. So it just is what it is. So I've got to find a different way. I've thought about the football microphone where I point a shotgun mic at you. I don't know that I want to be on camera pointing a parabolic cone at you. So Craig and I were talking, and he said, yeah, PZM on the back that would just pick up the vibrations from the back part of the room. He said, I think we can make that work. So at some point in time, he and I are going to get together. We're going to work that out. And then we'll go from there as to what we have to purchase to make it work. All right. I'm not going to say any more questions. I'm going to say, let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for Jesus, that Son of Man. Yes, he is fully God and fully man. That Son of Man who comes to redeem us, who comes to make us to be your own. And we thank you, Heavenly Father, that we are in that light and that the darkness does not overtake us, and that you are with us to prevent that darkness from consuming us. Hold us up in that light and send us forth with that light, that the darkness may be dispelled and pushed back by your power, your glory, and your might. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we will have class next week, and we will start at verse 36, and we will see you on Sunday.